When two teams collide, sometimes it's more than basketball. It becomes personal, a story written in bruises, bad blood, and the hunger for redemption. That's exactly what made this matchup between the Indiana Fever and the Minnesota Lynx impossible to ignore. Just weeks earlier, Kayla McBride's sharp elbow had left Lexi Hull humiliated and somehow even punished by the referees with a technical foul. Fans were outraged, calling it one of the most baffling calls of the season. So when the rematch rolled around, the tension was already simmering. Everyone wanted to know, would Hull back down or would she flip the script? What unfolded didn't just give Indiana a highlight for the ages, it told the story of a franchise that refuses to stay down no matter what's thrown at them. From devastating injuries to shocking comebacks, this wasn't just another regular season win. This was redemption wrapped inside one of the most resilient runs the Fever have shown in years. In their earlier meeting, the Fever and Lynx clashed in a game that turned ugly fast. Midway through, Kayla McBride's elbow caught Lexi Hull square in the face. Most expected the refs to call it what it clearly looked like, a foul on McBride. Instead, in one of the most controversial whistles of the season, Hull was hit with a technical, and the hit wasn't just painful, it was insulting. Fans lit up social media with anger, demanding answers and wondering how the league could allow such a decision to stand. Hull, who had already been stepping into a larger role because of injuries, was left with the humiliation of being painted as the guilty party. That moment created a storyline nobody could ignore. When the Fever's schedule revealed Minnesota would be back on the court opposite them, the matchup became more than just another date. This was unfinished business, and Lexi Hull carried the weight of that wrong call into their rematch, determined to write a different ending. Before Indiana could even think about redemption, they had to survive a season that felt cursed from the start. The injury report became a revolving door, and every week seemed to bring another devastating headline. Caitlin Clark, the rookie phenom expected to lift the Fever into the spotlight, was sidelined by a groin injury. Sophie Cunningham tore her MCL. Sydney Colson went down with a torn ACL. Chloe Bibby's knee gave out. Ari McDonald fractured her foot. The list went on, long enough to make a starting five out of players forced into street clothes. By mid-season, the Fever weren't just thin, they were skeletal. Coaches scrambled to patch rotations with hardship signings. Rookies and role players suddenly thrust into starring minutes. For most franchises, this would have been the death blow. A team missing nearly half its core is expected to fold, sink in the standings, and quietly wait for next year. But Indiana didn't quit. Instead, the adversity created a chip on their shoulder, a refusal to give in. Every absence became fuel, and the pressure forged a team that would rather fight shorthanded than give up entirely. That resilience turned the narrative from hopeless to compelling, setting the stage for something far bigger than survival. When the news finally broke that Caitlin Clark's season was over, it felt like a gut punch that echoed far beyond Indiana. At first, her groin injury had been described as nagging, the kind of setback that might cost her a few games but nothing more. Then came the announcement. She wouldn't be returning at all. For a franchise that had pinned so much hope on her rookie year, it was crushing. Clark wasn't just a scorer or a playmaker, she was the heartbeat of the team, the player whose energy lit up both the locker room and the fan base. In Iowa, fans had followed her every move, and in Indiana, she was already transforming the Fever into a must-watch squad. Losing her didn't just hurt the box score, it deflated the spirit of a roster already battered by injuries. Every missed game felt like a reminder of what could have been, a playoff push powered by one of the most electric rookies the league had ever seen. Instead, the Fever had to face reality. Their brightest star would be stuck on the sidelines cheering from the bench. But if Clark couldn't carry them, the question hung in the air. Who would step up and take the reins? When Caitlin Clark was ruled out, many assumed the Fever's offense would collapse. Instead, Kelsey Mitchell turned that void into her stage. Already known as a dangerous scorer, she elevated her game to an entirely new level, carrying the team on nights when the rest of the roster struggled to keep pace. Mitchell didn't just pick up the slack, she became the franchise's most prolific scorer in a single season, even surpassing numbers once owned by the legendary Tamika Catchings. Night after night, she poured in over 20 points, often against defenses that had only one mission: to stop her. Double teams chased her across screens, scouting reports screamed her name, and still she found ways to carve through lanes or bury threes under pressure. What made it more impressive was that she wasn't just scoring. She was doing it while taking on ball handling duties, leadership responsibilities, and the weight of expectation from a fan base desperate for hope. Mitchell's relentlessness gave Indiana something they shouldn't have had: belief. With every crossover, every dagger jumper, she made the statement that the Fever weren't done yet. If Clark couldn't finish the season, Mitchell was determined to prove the story wasn't over. While Mitchell carried the offensive torch, Aaliyah Boston became the stabilizer who kept the entire team from unraveling. In a season where rotations shifted constantly and lineups looked different from night to night, Boston provided one thing Indiana desperately needed: reliability. She delivered steady scoring in the paint, averaging around 15 points per game, but it was her presence on the glass that made the biggest difference. Over the final stretch of the season, she pulled down more than 8 rebounds a night, often battling against bigger and more experienced forwards. That consistency helped Indiana avoid complete collapse, especially when their defense was tested. Boston didn't just rebound, she set a new team record for single-season boards, proving she wasn't just surviving the chaos, but thriving in it. On both ends of the court, her impact was undeniable. She bodied up opponents, protected the rim, and turned broken possessions into second-chance opportunities. Whenever the roster felt like it was on the edge of falling apart, Boston's effort glued it back together. For a franchise searching for stability, her role wasn't flashy, it was foundational. She became the anchor Indiana clung to, ensuring that even in the storm, the Fever never drifted too far off course. What transformed Indiana's season wasn't just the stars stepping up, it was the unlikely heroes who refused to let the team sink. Players brought in on hardship contracts, meant to simply fill minutes, started producing like veterans with something to prove. Odyssey Sims, signed when the roster was at its thinnest, came off the bench and dropped double-digit performances, reminding everyone she still belonged in the league. Aerial Powers became a spark whenever the offense stalled, burying critical shots that shifted momentum. Natasha Howard provided the kind of versatile defense and steady scoring that filled every gap left by the injured core. These weren't supposed to be difference makers. They were supposed to be placeholders. Yet they turned into the glue that held Indiana together. The energy shifted. Every player in uniform began believing they had a role in the turnaround. What once looked like a team destined for collapse instead started looking like a unit fueled by resilience. Each surprise contribution added to the growing sense that Indiana was rewriting its season, not just surviving it. And all of that momentum built toward a single night, one game that would symbolize everything the Fever had become. It all came full circle against Minnesota. Earlier in the season, the Lynx had embarrassed Indiana by 50 points, a loss so brutal that it felt like a scar etched into the Fever's identity. But this rematch was different. Indiana stepped onto the court not as a broken roster limping through the schedule, but as a battle-hardened team forged by adversity. The game itself wasn't perfect. Minnesota still threw their weight around, but the Fever matched them blow for blow. And in the final moments, it was Lexi Hull who seized the narrative. In the first matchup, she had been a non-factor, swallowed up by Minnesota's defense. This time, she delivered the dagger, a clutch three-pointer that silenced the Lynx and lit up the Fever bench. The shot wasn't just 3 points, it was redemption. It symbolized everything Indiana had become, a team that could take its worst moment and turn it into fuel for triumph. When the buzzer sounded, the scoreboard read, "Victory for the Fever," but the result was bigger than one game. It was proof that resilience, belief, and unity could turn a season of despair into one of defiance. Indiana hadn't just survived, they had rewritten their story.